we can only go as far as the public will take us. You know, like the people that are paying the money to see us, or the, you know, the people that want to look at us on the TV. We can only go as far as they want us to go. What I'd like to do, I'd like to stick with the guys as long as I can. But no matter what I do, I'm sure that they're always going to say, if they say that's David Jones, they're going to say that's David Jones. You remember that David Jones from Monkees? You know, whether I'm sitting in a cafe drinking a cup of coffee with a heavy beard on my face out of work, they're still going to say that.
Here we come, walking down the street. We get the funniest looks from everyone we meet.
I was in America for 5 years. I was on Broadway for 2.5 years.
There is love. Does it fall from skies above? Is it underneath the willow tree that I've been dreaming of? On City's Hill, from Welling, on City's Hill, part of the furniture, there isn't a lot to spare. Who cares that whatever we got, we
Georgia Brown presenting Davy Jones.
And the other guys, for instance, Peter was in the Village for 10 years. He left school when he was 15 or something, and, well, he was at college, but he was in the Village from the time he was 15 to the time he was 24.
I was a folk singer in Greenwich Village, just after Dylan left. Richie Havens and Roger McGuinn, who was then Jim McGuinn, and Jose Feliciano, more guys than I can actually think of to name were on the street in those days. And I was doing that for a couple of years, and then one day I heard from on high, "Get out of town." It really was a voice from on high. I have no idea. And I said, okay. Just let me get a ride to and a place to stay in either LA or San Francisco, and I'm gone. And I was turned out to be LA. And I landed in LA in end of June 1965. And I think I was auditioning for the Monkees by August or so, because it was a long, drawn-out process, and we signed in October. So that's basically, I mean, Steve Stills, it was a friend of mine from Greenwich Village, who also was on the West Coast, who told me about it and said, "Go try out." And I went, yeah. And he called me back. He said, "No, go try out." I went, "Okay."
Where are you from originally?
Washington.
How'd you get out here?
It wasn't easy.
No, tell me the truth.
It was a 47 Chevy, okay. Most of the way.
Anything frantic happened on the way out?
Well, it blew.
Whereabouts?
Just outside of Las Vegas. It took all of Las Vegas with it. You may have heard about it. It was the major catastrophe of the century.
Something the matter with your mouth?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Cost me $500 for the nose.
Do guys look at you and say, "Hey, what are you doing with the long hair and all that"?
No, but they often say, "Hey." I'm ashamed of my fellow man to tell you what my fellow man actually says to me on the street. Do you know that...
What do they say to you?
"Joe Beetle!" They say, "Joe Beetle!" Just because do they realize that since history, our founding fathers wore their hair long, Columbus wore his hair long, and...
Mike went all over Texas playing.
Tell us what your name is.
My name is Michael Blessing.
No, I want to hear the truth.
No, that's it, man. I'm telling you, it's a pseudonym.
How did you get to Nesmith?
Well, Nesmith is my real name.
Well, how did you get to Blessing?
It's a pseudonym.
How did you happen to pick Blessing?
Well, why are you asking me that? It's weird. Get on something else.
All right, it is guest time once again on our show. And it's a pleasure to present this gentleman because this is a brand new artist, you might say, with a brand new song. Artist is good and song is good, and here he is. Michael Blessing. Let's hear it from Michael Blessing.
I'm not a dream, I'm not a
an angel, I'm just a man. You're not a queen, you're just a woman. Hold my hand. We'll make a space in the lives we both had planned. And here we'll stay until it's time for you to go.
You know, we like on our show to present brand new talent. We have presented a lot of brand new people on our show. People like Sonny and Cher and the Righteous Brothers were brand new when they came on our show, and they've done very well. It's a very good record, Michael. What's the name of it?
Until It's Time to Go.
And that was arranged by Shorty Rogers, a fantastic arranger, and it's on the Cold Picks label, right?
Right.
Is this the first time that you've really had a chance to really get out and expose this? Because I guess the record just came out, right? So this is the
It
first...
came out, it was released Wednesday.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's the first time. I really believe in the song.
Yeah,
I
do
really
too.
dig it.
It's a beautiful song, and it's by Michael Blessing, and it's on Cold Picks, and it's for sale. Let's have a nice hand for Michael Blessing. Good luck, Michael. Always going to be a big hit for you. We'll be right back after this message. Don't go away. Don't go away. Please don't go away.
And Mickey, he was a child star. He was a circus boy.
Did your parents like push you into show business, or is it something you just wanted?
They were
to do?
in the business, so they didn't push. I just kind of fell. Really, just.
What did they do?
My father was an actor. He'd done the Count of Monte Cristo series in the 50s. And my mom had been in the radio and done some singing, so it was a natural. I followed in my father's footsteps.
What was your first big part?
Circus boy in about 1956, I think. It was a little kid in a circus, black and white show on NBC.
How long did that run for?
It was about 3 or 4 years.
I see you're practicing to be a musician, huh?
Drummer boy.
Oh, but what's the occasion?
I'm gonna go in the army.
Oh, you don't think you're a little small to be in the Army?
Pete says in the army, drummer boys can be small.
Oh, I'm going to miss you. We'll all miss you.
Well, don't worry, I'll be back soon. Pete and Teddy are gonna get this war over in a jiffy.
You answered an ad.
Yeah.
Do I understand that? Tell me that story. We got about a minute here.
A minute. Standard casting call. They called us up and said, come down. And
you were living in L.A.?
I was living in L.A., and I was working in a band, and they wanted, actors who had some musical ability rather than the other way around, musicians who could act.
Right.
So I went down and got the job.
I was an actor. I was trying to get jobs. I'd done Mr. Novak and Peyton Place and, bits and pieces like that, guest shots. This is when I was about 19 years old. Circus Boy was when I was about 10. And nothing but school in between. And my agent sent me to an interview for this show called The Monkees. And I was going to college at the time, taking architectural drafting. And I went for this interview, and I almost didn't go. And then screen tests, and then more screen tests, and everybody was up for it in the whole world. And they chose me, fools. I think that they were looking for personalities and contrasting personalities rather than hiring an existing group, because I gather they had considered that, and they had interviewed some groups. But groups tend to be, that have born together or grew up together, tend to be similar in their personalities maybe, and that wouldn't necessarily work visually. So they were looking for contrasting personalities, people that would be very distinct and have a variety of talents. Like I was an actor, but I'd also sang and I also played the guitar, but the fools cast me as the drummer, naturally. So I learned the drums quick.
I think that the Monkees, as a TV show, were the 60s on television. There were no other TV shows of its type, in fact, not since, particularly in this one respect. The Monkees had no grown-up adult figures. We were young adults, college-age kids that, on our own, with no authority over us. And in a sense, that was one of the aspects of the 60s that the Monkees embodied as a TV show, again, not necessarily the four of us as members of the group, but the TV show, the whole phenomenon.
You were talking quite a bit during the day about the contribution that the Monkees made in one way or another around that time.
It is interesting that I can look back now objectively. At the time, I had no idea. I was just... But besides bringing long hair in the living room, which up until that time long-haired kids were considered dope addict freaks, right? But it brought long hair in the living room and made it acceptable. And we started a lot of people on their way. Carole King used to write most of our material, the songs. And Harry Nilsson wrote a lot of things for us I'm still very friendly with. And Neil Diamond wrote I'm a Believer, which was one of the biggest hits we had. And one of the other things it did, which I just realized recently, was for the first time it merged the music and the television industry. They'd always been overlapping at times, but it really merged those two industries and showed how successful and how powerful music, and rock music especially, and television, if they're combined, you know, now in concert and all those rock shows are obviously so successful.
Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode in my brand new deep dive series, and by popular demand, I am going to be diving into the Monkees studio albums. Now, I'm not sure, like in previous deep dive series, I've gone just straight in order through all of the albums, and I've done nothing else. I've devoted my entire channel to the series for the duration of the series, and I'm not sure that's how this one is going to flow. I may do some stuff in between, so don't expect that we're going to have a rapid succession of Monkee episodes here. That may be the case, or it may not. I tend to get burned out on artists very quickly when I start doing them one after another, after another, after another. So all I'm saying is we'll just see how this goes. But I'm very excited because the Monkees have been one of my favorite bands since I first saw the Pleasant Valley Sunday MTV day-long marathon of their television special. So this is going to be definitely one of my favorite series to do. And today we're going to be talking about their debut album, The Monkees, or based on the back cover, Meet the Monkees. So the Monkees were the brainchild of television producers Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider, who both worked for Screen Gems, which was a television unit of Columbia Pictures. In 1965, the two men formed Ray Burt Productions, and after seeing the Beatles films A Hard Day's Night and Help, sold an idea for a television show about a singing group called the Monkees to Screen Gems on April 16, 1965. Their original idea was to cast the Lovin' Spoonful, who were relatively unknown at the time, but the band were already signed to a record contract, which basically meant Screen Gems would not be able to profit from the music that they recorded for the show. Rafelson and Schneider decided to form a new group from scratch built around singer and actor Davy Jones, who was already under contract to Screen Gems and the Colpix label, which was a musical division of Columbia Pictures. On September 8th through 10th, 1965, Daily Variety and The Hollywood Reporter ran an ad to cast the remaining band members for the TV show. Out of 437 applicants, Michael Nesmith, Peter Tork, and Mickey Dolenz were cast, even though Mike Nesmith was the only one who actually had seen the ad. Don Kirshner, who was Screen Gems' head of music, was contracted to secure music for the Monkees pilot. His borough-building firm, Alden Music, had many songwriters on their roster who were looking for work after the British invasion made borough-building songwriters less in demand. The main songwriting duties for the group fell to relative newcomers Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, who had recently scored hits for Jay and the Americans and Paul Revere and the Raiders. One of their initial compositions for this new project was Theme from the Monkees, which helped get the series the green light. A joint venture between Columbia Screen Gems and RCA Victor called Cole Gems Records was created for the primary purpose of distributing Monkees records. Although the initial plans were for the Monkees to record the songs for the series themselves, after studio space and instruments were rented, it became quickly apparent that the group would not have time to gel as a band. Rafelson and Schneider asked Don Kirshner to recruit a producer for the Monkees sessions. Kirshner hired Snuff Garrett, who had composed several hits for Gary Lewis and the Playboys, to produce the initial musical cuts for the show, but Garrett decided that he wanted to have Davy Jones sing lead on all the songs, and that decision proved so unpopular with the rest of the band that Kirshner fired him and bought out his contract. Kirshner did allow Mike Nesmith to produce some sessions as long as he did not play on any of the tracks he produced, and Mike Nesmith did start using the other Monkees on his sessions, particularly Peter Tork, who obviously was an accomplished guitarist. he came back to Boyce and Hart to also produce some of the tracks. And he brought in one of his associates, Jack Keller, to lend some production experience to the session, since Nesmith and Boyce and Hart were relatively green in that regard. The album was released on October 10th, 1966, and went all the way to #1, which speaks to just how popular the television series was and just how stellar the songs on this album are. By and large, this is a solid album. So the Monkees' first album was intended to be a soundtrack to the TV show. And it's easy to forget that when the show started, this was like every other TV show where you had actors who were pretending to be the characters that they were playing and the occupation that they were playing. But audiences quickly forgot that what they were seeing on the screen, because it looked, for all intents and purposes, like the Monkees were actually performing the songs on the show, people got the impression that, oh, they must be a real band, which was actually not the case, at least for their first two albums. And so you had the two actors, which were Davy Jones and Mickey Dolenz, and the two musicians of the band, who were Peter Tork and Michael Nesmith. Even though Peter Tork plays very little, Mike Nesmith doesn't play a whole lot on this album. The seeds were already sown that this was going to be more than just a bunch of actors who were going to be miming and pretending to be the musicians who were their characters on the show. But this is a pretty solid album. I don't think you're going to find any Monkees fan who actually considers this their favorite Monkees album, but it's still relatively solid, and it's pretty much reflects the times, the musical styles of the times. So the opening track on side one is Theme for the Monkees, which has been heard ad nauseum. Every single Monkees Greatest Hits compilation has that track on it, usually at the beginning. So it's been played to death, but anybody who has watched the series knows that the version that they actually play over the credits is not the same version that you find on the album. This is a more fleshed out song on here, and it's okay. I've heard it to death, so I usually skip right over this track. Then you have Saturday's Child, which is a great, and it's better. These songs are better than they have any right to be. These were not songs that were dashed together haphazardly, half-assed, just to provide some music for the show. You had some great songwriters that were contributing music to this album. Saturday's Child is a great track. It's a great rocking track. You could have fooled anybody that this was a band other than a made-for-TV band. I Want to Be Free is a Davy Jones ballad. It's a light acoustic ballad. There is actually a more up-tempo version in the Monkees pilot that is heard, but this is a more reflective acoustic ballad that Davy Jones sings. Tomorrow's Gonna Be Another Day is another fantastic rocker.
And I don't care what you say. Tomorrow's gonna be another day.
And Mickey Dolenz was chosen to sing the harder rocking, more up-tempo tracks on here. His voice really gives the Monkees their personality on songs like Tomorrow's Gonna Be Another Day and Saturday's Child and Last Train to Clarksville. All those big hits, those up-tempo hits, you got Mickey Dolenz singing on those, and he gives those songs the Monkees' personality. So Tomorrow's Gonna Be Another Day is another excellent track. Then you've got a Mike Nesmith contribution, which is, to me, one of his best early Monkee songs, Papa Jean's Blues. It really sounds kind of like some of those Beatles for Sale songs that they were coming up with, which were derivative of Carl Perkins. But it's an excellent melodic, catchy country rock tune, and it's absolutely killer as a song. Then you have a bit of early psychedelia with Take a Giant Step. You've got that interesting flute instrument. Sounds a little bit like a harpsichord, but it's a very trippy track, and I absolutely love it. And a majority of these songs were overplayed to death on the series, let's be honest. But still, when you spend some time away from the series and some time away from this album, and you come back and listen to these songs, they really are great. And Take a Giant Step is wonderful. Might be my favorite song, and I'm going to go right out and say it's my favorite song on side one. Side two opens up with Last Train to Clarksville, which for me is their Stairway to Heaven. If I never hear this song again, I would not miss it ever. I've just heard this song too much. This is another song that pops up on every single Monkees Greatest Hits compilation. It's been overplayed so much. And yeah, it was a great tune. I'm sure it still is. It's got kind of a jangly pop song, but it obviously was one of their first hits, so I'm not here to argue about the merits of it. I'm just telling you, I'm kind of sick of it. This just doesn't seem to be my day. It is another Davy Jones ballad, and this is before he got into the totally cheesy, sickening, sugary, sweet stuff that we would see on subsequent albums. So it still works as a relative rock song, albeit a slower paced, kind of middle of the road rock song. So it's okay. I don't mind it. Then another kind of up-tempo rock song that Mickey sings on, Let's Dance On. For me, it's one of the weaker tracks on this album. Sort of one of those songs for the kids to dance to. It appears in the pilot episode, so it's all right. It's not terrible, but it's just nothing special. I'll Be True to You is another Davy Jones song, one of those ballads to get the teeny boppers' hearts all beating rapidly. So it's all right. But again, it's kind of a poppy rock song, so it's not as offensive as some of the future songs we would get from Davy. Then we have, and this is criminal, that we only have 2 Michael Nesmith vocals on this album. Sweet Young Thing, which has almost got like a hoedown, a trippy hoedown feel is, I guess, how I would characterize this song. And it's a stomping country rocker, almost like a jug band, sort of a real down south hoedown vibe to it. Absolutely love this song. And then the final track on here is Gonna Buy Me a Dog. Why this was included on here, I know why it was included, because it had to have a comedy track. This was a comedy series, and so we had to have some kind of goofball, nonsensical track. You got Mickey and Davy on the vocals. They're hamming it up, but it just does not work at all. It's a lame song. Their vocals are very forced, trying to force the humor on this particular song. It doesn't work at all, and I'm not a fan. It's the only song that I really hate off this album. The rest of them are pretty solid. So anyway, that's my take on the Monkees' debut album. So let me know what you think. Is it your favorite? I highly doubt it. It's not your worst album ever. It's a very solid debut. And like I said before, this album is way better than it ever had a right to be. This could have been a total catastrophe, a total cash grab, throwing any old shit on this album just to sell records and profit off the soundtrack, but they didn't. So in that respect, taking that into account, this is an excellent, excellent album. That's all I got to say. Hope you're enjoying this series. Let me know if you want me to do more, or if you're like, no, knock it off. All right, hope you're doing well. Take care.